In an age when giants walked upon the earth and corrupted angels led humanity astray, a single individual stood as the connection linking the heavens above to the world below. This individual's name was Enoch. His journey actually starts well before the mysterious vanishing that made him famous. The book of Genesis dedicates menishing 5 verses to describing Enoch's life. Yet entire volumes documenting his experiences exist beyond what we find in today's modern Bible. These ancient writings show us that Enoch served as a prophet whose memory faded with time, a recorder for the heavenly realm, and someone who personally observed events of cosmic significance that would shape the destiny of every human being. Before we continue, though, please take just a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel, but I only want you to do so if you truly appreciate the content I create here. And as I always do, I would really love to know your location. Feel free to introduce yourself down in the comment section below. Tell us what part of the world you're watching from and what the current time happens to be where you are. This really helps us recognize the truly global nature of our community. I'm grateful you've chosen to join me here today. So with no more delay, let's begin our exploration. The individual who journeyed alongside God, just 5 verses. That represents the complete amount of information Genesis chapter 5 provides about an individual named Enoch, positioned as the 7th descendant in the lineage from Adam. The passage moves swiftly through his family tree. Enoch reached 65 years of age before he fathered Methuselah. Following that particular birth, a transformation occurred. The scripture tells us he journeyed with God throughout 300 years. Then arrives the statement that has mystified those who read it for multiple thousands of years. Enoch journeyed with God, then he existed no more, because God removed him from the earth. There's no mention of death, no record of burial, no grave marker, simply an emptiness where the recording of a death ought to appear. Every single other individual named within Genesis 5 adheres to an identical structure. They experienced life, they produced children, then they experienced death. This formula repeats itself almost like the steady beating of a drum all through the chapter, yet when we arrive at Enoch's entry, this established pattern shatters. The text outright refuses to state that he died. Rather, it declares that God removed him. This extreme brevity generates mystery. Readers from ancient times noticed this obvious gap right away. These 5 verses found in Genesis chapter 5, verses 18 through 24, generate far more questions than any answers they might provide. What exactly does it mean to journey with God? How does any person journey so completely with God that even death itself becomes something they bypass entirely? The Hebrew expression employed here, which speaks of walking with God, shows up only one additional time throughout Genesis, where it describes Noah. These 2 individuals alone earned this uncommon distinction. Both existed during periods marked by tremendous corruption. Both stood distinctly separate from the generations surrounding them. The Jewish tradition that was preserved within the Septuagint, which is the ancient Greek translation that was completed during the 3rd century before the Common Era, renders this particular phrase as, Enoch brought pleasure to God. This specific translation brings attention to the relational dimension. Journeying with God signified existing in complete harmony alongside the divine will. It signified maintaining righteousness during an age drowning in wickedness. It signified remaining faithful even when the entire world surrounding you has abandoned what is sacred. Yet the mystery grows even deeper when we examine the numerical details. Enoch experienced a total of 365 years of life. Every other patriarch mentioned within Genesis 5 lived considerably longer lifespans. Adam managed to reach 930 years. Methuselah, who was Enoch's son, holds the all-time record at 969 years. And yet Enoch departed at just 365. The number itself commands attention. A solar year contains 365 days. Readers from ancient times recognized symbolism within this specific figure. Enoch lived exactly 1 year for every single day contained within the year, almost as if his complete life represented one full cosmic cycle. The passage gives us one additional detail. God removed him. The Hebrew verb that gets used in this instance, lakach, carries the meaning to take, to receive, to fetch. This same verb appears again when Elijah gets taken upward in the whirlwind multiple centuries afterward. This departure was not something natural. This represented divine intervention of the direct kind. This was God literally reaching downward and extracting someone from the typical flow of mortality that affects all humans. Interpreters from early Jewish communities grasped that something truly extraordinary had occurred to Enoch. The Book of Sirach, which was written approximately 180 years before the Common Era, references Enoch as a model of repentance and as a sign meant for future generations to observe. The letter to the Hebrews found in the New Testament, which was composed during the 1st century of the Common Era, declares that through faith Enoch was taken upward so that he would never experience death. The author goes on to add that prior to his removal he had been confirmed as someone who brought pleasure to God. These 5 brief verses functioned like a doorway. Scribes and prophets from ancient times walked straight through that doorway into expansive libraries overflowing with visions and divine revelation. They posed the questions that the Genesis passage stirs up, but never actually answers. What exactly did Enoch observe throughout those 300 years spent journeying with God? What knowledge did he acquire? What assignments did he carry out? Why was he viewed as deserving of such an absolutely unprecedented reward? The Genesis narrative positions Enoch at a very specific point in history. His life unfolded before the catastrophic flood arrived. He personally witnessed the opening chapters of human civilization. If we follow the genealogies, he entered the world merely 654 years following Adam's departure from the garden. He lived during humanity's earliest age, when individuals still retained memories of Eden, when human lifespan extended across multiple centuries, when the separation between heaven and earth appeared thinner than it would later become. The name of his son Methuselah contains a prophecy within it. Based on ancient interpretation, Methuselah translates as, "When he experiences death, it shall arrive." Jewish tradition maintains that Methuselah died during the very same year when the flood waters came. If we accept this interpretation as accurate, then Enoch possessed knowledge about the approaching judgment. He gave his son a name that functioned as a living timer counting down. Every single year that Methuselah continued living represented another year of grace granted before the waters would come. This contextual background holds importance for grasping Enoch's complete story. He didn't exist during peaceful times. The passage immediately following his removal goes on to describe the corruption that ultimately led to the flood. Genesis chapter 6 begins with the mysterious account involving the sons of God selecting human women as wives. Violence completely filled the earth. Wickedness spread until it became universal. Enoch journeyed with God during this descent downward into chaos. He maintained his faithfulness even while the world around him fell completely apart. The authors of the New Testament recognized in Enoch a pattern that believers should follow. Jude, writing during the 1st century, quotes directly from an ancient text attributed to Enoch, identifying him as a prophet who delivered messages about the final judgment. This particular quotation originates from a work we will investigate thoroughly, a text that communities in ancient times treasured deeply but which modern Bibles have chosen to omit. Peter's second letter also makes allusions to teachings from Enoch when it discusses the angels who committed sin and were thrown into darkness. What caused Enoch to be special? The passage places emphasis on his journey with God. This wasn't some single isolated moment of faith. This represented 3 full centuries of unwavering devotion, day following day, year following year, decade following decade. Enoch sustained his relationship with the divine. In a world sliding steadily toward violence and corruption, he continued walking the sacred path. During an age when humanity forgot about its Creator, he continued remembering. When other people pursued whatever their own desires dictated, he pursued righteousness instead. His removal from earthly existence without ever experiencing death places him apart from nearly the entirety of human history. Only Elijah the prophet shares this particular distinction within the Hebrew Bible. Both individuals were removed. Both managed to bypass the grave entirely. Both were regarded as righteous during wicked historical periods. Both experienced extraordinary encounters with the divine realm prior to their departure from earth. These 5 verses create a portrait depicting exceptional holiness. They describe an individual who transcended the normal limitations affecting humans through maintaining faithfulness. They point toward a destiny that exists beyond death for those who journey closely with God. They hint at knowledge and experience that the brief Genesis account simply cannot contain fully. Readers from ancient times understood perfectly well that these 5 verses were not where Enoch's story concluded. These verses were actually where it began. The Genesis passage provided the foundation, the basic facts, the general outline. However, the complete account of what Enoch observed, what he learned, what he accomplished during those 300 years spent journeying with God, that full story was preserved within other texts that Jewish communities cherished throughout centuries, texts that early Christians both studied and quoted from, texts that eventually fell outside the boundaries of the canon yet never disappeared entirely. The individual who journeyed with God left behind far more than just 5 verses. He left behind an entire library containing visions, a detailed record of cosmic journeys, a testimony delivered against fallen angels, along with a promise concerning final judgment. The Genesis account provides our introduction to Enoch. However, to truly understand him, we must venture deeper. We must investigate the texts that communities in ancient times believed preserved his actual words, his actual experiences, his actual mission and purpose. Enoch was not simply removed from the earth. He experienced transformation. He was not simply extracted from earth's surface. He received a specific role to fulfill in heaven. He became a scribe. He became a witness. He became a prophet. And based on certain traditions, he even became an angel himself. His story opens with 5 verses located in Genesis. Yet it extends across multiple books, multiple visions, along with multiple journeys that traverse both the heavens and the earth. To grasp who the man was who journeyed with God, we must first grasp the world where he lived. We must investigate the corruption he personally witnessed, the judgment he predicted would come, along with the sacred knowledge he received from above. The Genesis account provides us with the outline. The lost books attributed to Enoch fill in all the details. Together, they convey the complete story of the 7th descendant from Adam, the individual God loved with such intensity that death itself was not allowed to touch him, the forgotten library of Enoch. Beyond those 5 verses contained in Genesis, another collection of texts came into existence. Communities from ancient Jewish tradition treasured these particular writings. They referred to them as the words of Enoch. They copied them carefully. They studied them intensively. Then they passed them down across generations. These texts, which scholars know collectively as the Enochian literature, form one of the most extensive collections of apocalyptic writing originating from the ancient world. This corpus divides itself into several distinct works. The largest work and the most influential one is First Enoch, which is sometimes called Ethiopic Enoch, because the complete text managed to survive in the Ge'ez language of Ethiopia. This particular book contains 5 major sections within it. The Book of the Watchers, covering chapters 1 through 36, tells about fallen angels, along with cosmic journeys. The Book of Parables, covering chapters 37 through 71, presents visions dealing with final judgment and a mysterious figure identified as the Son of Man. The Astronomical Book, covering chapters 72 through 82, reveals information about the movements of heavenly bodies. The Book of Dream Visions, covering chapters 83 through 90, recounts history using symbolic animals. The Epistle of Enoch, covering chapters 91 through 108, offers moral instruction combined with prophecy. Scholars at this point understand that these different sections were composed at different times by different authors. The oldest portions, particularly the Book of the Watchers, along with the Astronomical Book, likely date back to the 3rd or early 2nd century before the Common Era, based on scholarly analysis of manuscript evidence recovered from Qumran. The Book of Parables presents greater complexity for dating purposes. No fragments of this particular section were discovered at Qumran, which has led to significant scholarly debate. Some researchers have proposed dates as late as the 2nd or 3rd century of the Common Era, though most contemporary scholars favor composition during the 1st century, either before or after the Common Era, with the question still remaining unresolved. The dream visions, along with the epistle, probably belong to the 2nd century before the Common Era, during or shortly following the period of persecution under Antiochus Epiphanes. These dating estimates emerge from careful analysis examining language, theology, and historical references contained within the texts themselves. The Book of Dream Visions, for instance, clearly describes events of the Maccabean revolt using animal symbolism. This provides a terminus post quem, which is a point after which the text must have been written. The absence of any references to the later Roman occupation suggests composition before that particular period. Scholars rely on such clues to construct timelines. Throughout centuries, these texts existed primarily in fragments and translations. Greek portions survived in quotations made by church fathers. Some passages appeared within Byzantine manuscripts, but the full, complete text seemed lost forever. Then came the discovery at Qumran. Between the years 1947 and 1956, Bedouin shepherds, along with archaeologists, recovered hundreds of scrolls from caves located near the Dead Sea. Among these Dead Sea Scrolls were numerous copies of Enochian texts. The Qumran community, most likely the Essenes, treasured these writings deeply. Fragments from at least 20 different manuscripts of First Enoch were discovered in the caves. Only the biblical books of Psalms and Deuteronomy appear with greater frequency in the collection. This suggests strongly that the community regarded the words of Enoch as authoritative scripture. The manuscripts themselves date from the 3rd century before the Common Era, extending to the 1st century of the Common Era, confirming that these texts circulated widely throughout ancient Judaism. The presence of Aramaic fragments proved particularly significant for scholarship. Aramaic was the common language used by Jewish communities during the Second Temple period. Finding Enoch texts written in Aramaic demonstrated their Palestinian origin along with their early date. These weren't late fabrications created afterward. These were genuine ancient Jewish texts that predated Christianity by centuries. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church preserved the only complete version of First Enoch. For this particular community, the book never lost its canonical status at any point. It remains part of their biblical canon even today. Ethiopian Christians copied and preserved the entire work even when it disappeared everywhere else. Their manuscripts, though much later in date compared to the Qumran fragments, contain the full text that scholars study currently. Beyond First Enoch, other works belonging to the Enochian tradition existed. Second Enoch, which was preserved in Old Church Slavonic, describes the journey of Enoch through the heavens in considerably greater detail. This text likely originated during the 1st century in Egypt and shows Greek influence. It presents the ascent of Enoch through 7 heavens, his transformation into an angelic being, along with his dictation of books to his sons before returning to heaven permanently. Third Enoch, which is a Hebrew work from the 5th or 6th century of the Common Era, takes a different approach altogether. It describes the transformation of Enoch into the angel Metatron, who becomes the lesser YHWH, the Prince of the Divine Presence. This late text shows how Jewish mysticism continued developing Enochian traditions even after the earlier works had been set aside by Rabbinic Judaism. The Book of Jubilees, which is another Second Temple text found at Qumran, presents Enoch as the very first human to learn writing and knowledge. According to Jubilees, Enoch testified against the Watchers. He wrote down the divine condemnation. Then he was taken to the Garden of Eden to serve as a witness until the final judgment arrives. This portrayal influenced how later communities understood the role of Enoch. Fragments of yet another work appeared at Qumran. The Book of Giants, known from 6 fragmentary manuscripts in Aramaic, expands the story of the Nephilim. This text, which influenced later Manichaean literature, describes the giant offspring of the Watchers experiencing disturbing dreams about the coming flood. The giants ask Enoch to interpret these dreams for them, and he delivers the message of their impending doom. Why did these texts matter with such intensity to communities in ancient times? They addressed questions the biblical text raised, but never answered. They provided detail about the period occurring before the flood. They explained where evil originated. They described the structure of the cosmos. They offered hope for final justice. They preserved what ancient readers believed were the actual words and visions of Enoch. The Enochian literature shaped Jewish thought during the Second Temple period. Ideas about angels, demons, the origin of sin, the final judgment, along with the Messiah, found expression in these texts before they appeared in later rabbinic literature or Christian writings. The letter of Jude in the New Testament quotes directly from 1 Enoch chapter 1, verses 9. The author treats the words of Enoch as prophetic scripture. Early church fathers like Tertullian and Clement of Alexandria accepted 1 Enoch as authentic. And yet, these texts eventually lost their place in most biblical canons. Rabbinic Judaism, developing after the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 of the Common Era, moved away from apocalyptic literature. The rabbis focused on the Torah and on developing oral traditions. Texts like Enoch, with their emphasis on angelic rebellion and cosmic secrets, fell out of favor. They were too dualistic, too focused on supernatural evil, too speculative about heavenly matters. Christianity followed a similar path eventually. Early believers valued Enochian texts, but as the Church defined its canon during the 4th century, most communities excluded these works. Only Ethiopia retained them within their canon. The reasons for exclusion varied considerably. Some church fathers questioned whether the text was authentic. Others worried about teachings concerning angels and demons. Still others simply followed the emerging consensus that favored the Hebrew scriptures recognized by Jewish authorities. And yet the influence never truly disappeared completely. Medieval Jewish mysticism drew on Enochian traditions. Christian apocalypticism returned to Enochian themes. Islamic traditions about the prophet Idris preserved certain Enochian elements. When scholars rediscovered these texts in the modern era, they found a missing link in understanding how Jewish and Christian thought developed. The lost Library of Enoch represents more than mere historical curiosity. These texts preserve ancient Jewish interpretation of the Genesis story. They show us how communities existing before and during the time of Jesus understood sin, judgment, along with redemption. They reveal the cosmic worldview that shaped apocalyptic expectation. They demonstrate that ancient readers saw considerably more in those 5 Genesis verses than modern readers often notice today. According to the texts themselves, Enoch wrote 366 books in total. The astronomical book claims this specific number. These books contained all knowledge, all wisdom, all the secrets of both heaven and earth. Most of that library has been lost. What survives, 1st Enoch, 2nd Enoch, fragments of the Book of Giants, represents only a fraction of what ancient tradition attributed to the 7th descendant from Adam. The rise of the Watchers. The story opens before the flood during the earliest generations of humanity. Genesis chapter 6 begins with a disturbing account. The sons of God observed that the daughters of humans were beautiful. They selected wives from among them, whomever they chose. The passage is brief. The implications are vast in scope. Who were these sons of God? What did their actions set into motion? The Book of the Watchers provides answers. According to this ancient text, the sons of God were angels, specifically a class of angels called Watchers. Their name comes from their assigned role. They watched over humanity. They observed the earth from the heavenly realm. However, watching was not enough to satisfy them. They desired what they saw. 200 angels made a pact together. Their leader was Shemihaza, chief among them. Other leaders included Azazel, Armaros, Barakiel, and many more. The text lists their names, 20 inches total, each one commanding 10 angels beneath them. These were not minor spirits of little consequence. These were powerful beings from the divine council. They held positions of authority within the heavenly hierarchy. The Book of the Watchers describes their descent to earth. They came down to Mount Hermon during the days of Jared, who was Enoch's father. The location carries significance. Mount Hermon rises in the far north of ancient Canaan, marking the boundary between the Promised Land and the regions lying beyond. Its peaks, covered with snow, made it a place of mystery and power. The name Hermon may derive from the Hebrew word meaning devoted to destruction or curse. Whether the mountain was named for what happened there or the event gave the mountain its ominous name, the association between place and fall became permanent. Before descending to earth, the Watchers bound themselves together with an oath. They swore allegiance to their plan. Each one vowed to go through with the scheme and to share the guilt equally. This detail proved significant. They knew their action violated the cosmic order. They understood the consequences fully, yet they chose to proceed anyway. The oath bound them together in sin. None could claim innocence or ignorance afterward. Why did they do this? The Book of the Watchers suggests desire as a motivation. They saw human women and wanted them. But desire alone doesn't explain such a coordinated rebellion. These were beings who stood in the presence of God. They knew divine will intimately. They understood the boundaries between heaven and earth. Their transgression was not impulse. It was calculated rebellion. Some interpretations suggest that pride motivated them. They saw humans as inferior creatures, yet watched as God favored these beings. Perhaps resentment grew within them. Perhaps they sought to corrupt what God had made. Perhaps they wanted to create their own race, their own legacy. The text doesn't explicitly state their deeper motives. It shows us their actions along with their consequences. The Watchers descended to earth and carried out their plan. They took human wives for themselves. They taught their wives forbidden knowledge. They violated the boundary between divine and human. This boundary was not arbitrary in nature. It maintained the proper order of creation. Angels belong to the heavenly realm. Humans belong to earth. The mixing of these orders introduced chaos into the world. Readers from ancient times understood the theological significance. The sin of the Watchers echoed the sin in the garden. Eve ate the forbidden fruit to become like God, to gain knowledge reserved for the divine. The Watchers brought knowledge down to earth, sharing what should have remained in heaven. Both transgressions involved crossing boundaries. Both brought corruption as their result. Both led to judgment. The oath the Watchers swore on Mount Hermon became a symbol of organized rebellion. This was not individual sin. This was conspiracy. The angels planned together, committed together, then fell together. Their unity in wrongdoing made them more dangerous. It also made their condemnation more complete. None could claim they were led astray. All participated willingly. The number 200 carries significance in ancient numerology. It represents completion and fullness. These were not a few rogue angels acting alone. This was a substantial portion of the Watcher class. The rebellion was widespread and organized. The text emphasizes this to show the scope of the cosmic crisis that followed. The leadership role of Shemihaza requires attention. His name means "my name is rebellion," or he saw the name. Later tradition sometimes blames Azazel more than Shemihaza. But the Book of the Watchers clearly identifies Shemihaza as the instigator and chief. He proposed the plan. He organized the oath. He led the descent. His fall from grace parallels the fall of Satan in later Christian tradition, though the texts don't explicitly connect them. The Mount Hermon setting connects the story to geography. Readers from ancient times knew this mountain. They could see it, visit it, point to it. The story was not happening in some mythical realm. It happened here in the real world at a specific location. This grounding in real geography made the account more immediate and troubling. Evil entered the world not through abstract forces, but through concrete actions at a specific place. The oath itself deserves consideration. In ancient Near Eastern culture, oaths held supreme power. To swear an oath was to bind oneself absolutely. Breaking an oath brought curse and doom. The Watchers knew this. By swearing their oath, they made their rebellion irrevocable. They chose damnation as a group. This collective choice emphasizes their guilt and their punishment. The timing of the descent during the days of Jared places the event in the specific genealogical timeline. Jared was the father of Enoch, the 6th generation from Adam. This means Enoch was alive, possibly already born when the Watchers fell. He witnessed the beginning of the corruption. He saw the angels descend. He understood from personal observation what his writings would later condemn. The Book of the Watchers presents this descent as the pivotal moment in early human history. Everything that follows, the violence, the corruption, the flood, traces back to this act. The Watchers' rebellion set in motion forces that nearly destroyed humanity entirely. Their choice on Mount Hermon became the cosmic crime that defined an age. Why did God permit this? The text doesn't say. It presents the event as happening, as breaking the divine order, but doesn't explore why the angels had the freedom to make such a choice. Later, Jewish and Christian theology would wrestle with questions of angelic free will and divine foreknowledge. The Book of the Watchers focuses on what happened and what it caused, not on why God allowed it. The descent from Mount Hermon marks a boundary in sacred history. Before this moment, the earth was less corrupted. After this moment, evil took root in new and terrible forms. The Watchers brought heaven down to earth, but they brought it down in twisted, perverted ways. They brought knowledge that should have remained hidden. They created beings that should never have existed. They shattered the order that kept creation functioning properly. This was the world that Enoch knew. This was the crisis he witnessed personally. This was the corruption he would testify against. The rise of the Watchers set the stage for everything that followed in his story. Their rebellion created the need for a witness, a scribe, a prophet who could stand between heaven and earth and declare the truth. Enoch became that witness. But first, he had to understand what the Watchers had done and what consequences their actions would bring, the corruption of the earth. The Watchers did not simply take human wives then settle down peacefully. Their presence on earth unleashed a cascade of corruption. The Book of the Watchers catalogues their crimes in detail. Each leader among the fallen angels taught specific forbidden knowledge. Each gift poisoned humanity in different ways. Azazel, one of the chief leaders, taught metalwork. He showed humans how to extract ore from the earth and forge it into tools. This might seem beneficial. Metalworking advanced civilization. But Azazel focused on specific applications. He taught the making of swords, knives, shields, and body armor. He gave humanity the technology of war. Before the Watchers descended, conflicts might have involved stones and wooden clubs. After the teaching of Azazel, humans could craft weapons designed purely for ending life. But the corruption of Azazel went deeper still. He taught cosmetics and beautification. He showed women how to enhance their appearance with eye paint and colored dyes. He revealed the art of precious stones and jewelry. These teachings might seem trivial compared to weapons. The text treats them as equally corrupting. Why? Because they introduced vanity. They created desire for appearance over substance. They taught humanity to deceive through beauty, to value surface over depth. Shemihaza taught enchantments and the cutting of roots. This knowledge dealt with magic and sorcery. He revealed how to manipulate spiritual forces, how to create spells, how to bind and control through supernatural means. This teaching violated the proper relationship between humanity and the spiritual realm. Humans were meant to approach the divine through prayer and righteousness. Shemihaza offered shortcuts, manipulations, ways to compel spiritual forces rather than submit to divine order. Armoros taught the resolving of enchantments, essentially counter-magic. Barakiel taught astrology, the reading of omens in the stars. Kokabeel taught signs and portents. Ezekiel taught knowledge of the clouds. Arakiel taught the signs of the earth. Shamsiel taught the signs of the sun. Sariel taught the course of the moon. Each angel specialized in a different area of forbidden knowledge. The astrological teachings require special attention. The astronomical Book of Enoch emphasizes that the Watchers taught a corrupted astronomy. They revealed how to read fate in the stars, how to predict through celestial movements, how to believe that human destiny was written in the heavens. This contradicted divine will. God alone determined human fate. The stars were lights and markers for seasons, nothing more. Teaching humans to worship or trust the stars, to see them as determinative forces, led people away from the true God. Warfare technology, magic, astrology, sorcery, these teachings shared a common thread. They gave humans power that corrupted them. They provided knowledge that led to pride and violence. They revealed secrets that should have remained hidden. The Watchers offered forbidden fruit, and humanity ate eagerly. The consequences manifested quickly. Violence spread across the earth. With better weapons came more deadly conflicts. With magical knowledge came attempts to manipulate and control. With astrology came fatalism and the abandonment of moral responsibility. The teachings of the Watchers poisoned every aspect of human society. But the greatest corruption came from the offspring of the Watchers and human women. The Book of the Watchers calls them Nephilim, though other texts use different names: giants, fallen ones, mighty men. These beings were hybrids, part angel and part human. They possessed the strength of their angelic fathers and the physical form to act in the material world. The Nephilim grew to enormous size. Traditions from ancient times described them as towering over normal humans. The Book of Giants found in fragments at Qumran provides more detail. The giants Ohia and Hahia stood thousands of cubits tall according to some versions. Whether literal or symbolic, the emphasis on size represents their unnatural power and their difference from normal humanity. These giants possessed appetites to match their size. They consumed vast quantities of food. The Book of the Watchers states, "They devoured the produce of all the people until humans could no longer sustain them." Crops that fed families for months disappeared into the bellies of the giants. Livestock vanished. The giants ate everything in sight. When normal food ran out, the giants turned to forbidden sustenance. The text states they began to sin against birds, beasts, reptiles, and fish. They consumed these creatures in ways that violated natural law. Some interpretations suggest they ate them raw and living. Others suggest the giants consumed blood, which violated divine commandment even before the flood. The wickedness escalated further. The giants began to devour one another. Cannibalism spread among them. They fought and destroyed each other even as they oppressed humanity. The violence became universal. The earth filled with blood and wrongdoing. Every inclination of the human heart turned toward evil continually, as Genesis chapter 6 confirms. The Nephilim represent the ultimate violation of creation order. They should not have existed. Their very being testified to the crime of the Watchers. Part angel, part human, they belonged to neither realm fully. This liminal state made them dangerous and corrupt. They had power beyond humans, but lacked the divine nature to use it righteously. They had physical form, but possessed something of angelic strength. The corruption extended beyond violence. The text emphasizes that humanity learned wickedness from the Watchers and their offspring. People adopted the values and practices of the fallen angels. They pursued power through forbidden means. They sought knowledge that corrupted rather than enlightened. They abandoned righteousness in favor of immediate gratification. The earth itself began to cry out. This detail appears repeatedly in the Book of the Watchers. The ground that absorbed the blood of the innocent, the land that witnessed the violence, the creation that suffered under the footsteps of the giants, all of this sent up a cry to heaven. The earth became a witness against the Watchers. Nature itself protested the unnatural beings that desecrated it. Women who bore the Nephilim suffered terribly. The text describes their anguish. They carried children who grew to impossible size. They birthed beings who would terrorize humanity. The Watchers had violated these women, used them for their own desires, and left them to bear the consequences. The suffering of the women joined the cry of the earth, rising to the gates of heaven. The souls of those destroyed by the Nephilim also cried out. Unlike the righteous dead who rested in peace, those destroyed by violence found no rest. Their spirits called for justice. They demanded that heaven respond to what was happening on earth. The accumulation of innocent blood created a testimony that could not be ignored. This comprehensive corruption fulfilled what the Watchers had initiated. Their descent led to forbidden teaching. Their teaching led to violence and sorcery. Their offspring brought physical destruction. The moral, spiritual, and physical dimensions of creation all suffered contamination. Nothing remained untouched by the sin of the Watchers. The Book of the Watchers emphasizes that this corruption threatened to destroy humanity entirely. If left unchecked, the giants would have consumed everything. If allowed to continue, the forbidden knowledge would have led every human astray. If permitted to persist, the violence would have ended all life. The crisis demanded response. The situation required intervention. The corruption of the earth set the stage for judgment. But before judgment could fall, heaven needed a witness. Someone who could document what had happened. Someone who could testify against the Watchers and their works. The cry of the earth and the call of Enoch. The corruption reached a threshold. The cries ascending to heaven became too numerous to ignore. The earth soaked in innocent blood demanded justice. The souls of the destroyed cried out from their resting places. Even the 4 great archangels heard these cries as they carried out their duties watching over humanity. Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel. These 4 stood before the throne of God as chief ministers of the divine will. Their names reveal their functions. Michael means who is like God and serves as the warrior and protector. Gabriel means God is my strength and serves as the messenger. Raphael means God heals and serves as the healer and guardian. Uriel means God is my light and serves as the illuminator of truth. These 4 witnessed what transpired on earth. They saw the Watchers descending. They watched the forbidden teaching spread. They observed the Nephilim consuming and destroying. They heard the cries rising like smoke from 1,000 fires. According to the Book of the Watchers, they brought the case before the throne of the Most High. Their report detailed the crimes. Azazel had taught metalwork and warfare. The earth drowned in violence because of weapons he revealed. Shemihazah had led the descent and taught sorcery. The Watchers had violated human women and produced offspring that should never have existed. The Nephilim destroyed the resources of the earth and terrorized humanity. Forbidden knowledge had spread like poison through every nation. The archangels presented more than facts. They presented the cries themselves. The text describes them, saying, "You see what Azazel has done, how he has taught all unrighteousness on earth, and revealed the eternal secrets which were preserved in heaven." They reported that Shemihazah had taught enchantments. They explained how the actions of the Watchers had led to universal corruption. They brought the attention of heaven to the crisis on earth. The response of God came immediately. The Most High dispatched each of the 4 archangels with specific missions. Uriel received orders to warn Noah about the coming flood. Raphael received orders to bind Azazel hand and foot and cast him into darkness. Michael received orders to bind Shemihazah and the other Watchers. Gabriel received orders to destroy the Nephilim by turning them against each other. But before these judgments could be executed, heaven required something else: a witness, a scribe, someone who could document the crimes and deliver the verdict. The divine court needed a human voice to testify against the Watchers. Angels could execute judgment, but a human should declare it. The Watchers had sinned against humanity. A human should confront them with their doom. Enoch received this calling. The text does not explain in detail why he was chosen. His righteousness provides part of the answer. Genesis says he walked with God. The Book of the Watchers builds on this foundation. Enoch stood apart from the corruption around him. He had not learned the forbidden teachings. He had not participated in the violence. He had maintained his integrity while the world collapsed into wickedness. His role as the seventh from Adam may have held significance. 7 represents completion and perfection in biblical numerology. As the seventh generation, Enoch embodied a complete cycle. He stood at a point where one era ended and another began. His position in the genealogy marked him as special before his actions demonstrated his righteousness. The text describes the initial commission of Enoch. The archangels appeared to him. They revealed what had happened with the Watchers. They explained the coming judgment. They told him he had been chosen to serve as the scribe of heaven, the recorder of divine verdicts, the voice that would speak condemnation to the fallen angels. The response of Enoch showed his character. He did not refuse. He did not question his worthiness. He did not ask to be spared such a terrible mission. He accepted the role. This acceptance parallels other biblical figures who received dangerous missions. Moses before Pharaoh, Jeremiah before the kings, Ezekiel before the exiles. Enoch joined the line of those who spoke divine truth regardless of personal cost. The text emphasizes that Enoch was taken up to heaven before being sent to confront the Watchers. He did not go to them as merely a righteous human. He went as one who had stood in the divine council. He went as one who had seen the throne room. He went with authority granted directly from the Most High. This transformation from righteous man to heavenly messenger represents the first stage of the journey of Enoch beyond normal human experience. His mission was specific. He was to go to the Watchers and pronounce their doom. He was to document their crimes. He was to write down the verdict. He was to serve as the human witness that the divine court required. His words would become the permanent record of what the Watchers had done and what consequences they would face. The cry of the earth found its answer in the call of Enoch. The corruption that demanded response received it through a righteous witness. The violence that cried out for justice would be answered by judgment. But first, the judgment had to be declared. The Watchers had to hear the verdict. The crimes had to be documented. The testimony had to be given. This moment marks the transformation of Enoch from righteous man to cosmic figure. Before this call, he was exceptional for his faithfulness. After this call, he became something more, a bridge between heaven and earth, a voice speaking for the divine to the fallen, a scribe recording truth that would endure beyond the flood. The earth cried out. Heaven heard. Enoch answered. The stage was set for confrontation between the righteous witness and those who had corrupted all living things. The judgment was decided. Now it needed to be proclaimed. The fallen angels who had descended from Mount Hermon would learn their fate from the mouth of a man who walked with God. The first journey, confronting the Watchers. Enoch traveled to the place where the Watchers dwelt. The text describes them gathered together, mourning and afraid. These beings, who had descended with such confidence, who had sworn their oath with such determination, now trembled. They sensed the shift in the cosmic order. They felt the weight of divine attention turning toward them. They knew judgment approached. When Enoch arrived, the Watchers recognized him immediately. They knew his reputation. They understood he walked with God in ways they had abandoned. They saw in him what they had lost: connection to the divine, righteousness, favor with the Most High. His presence among them testified to their fall more powerfully than any words could. The Book of the Watchers records the scene carefully. The fallen angels sat together in Abel's jail, a location whose name means God has rejected. The geography reinforces the theology. They inhabited a place whose very name proclaimed their status. They dwelt in rejection, far from the heavenly courts they once frequented. Enoch stood before them and began to speak. He did not speak his own words. He spoke as the messenger of heaven. The text emphasizes this repeatedly. These were not the judgments of Enoch or the opinions of Enoch. These were divine verdicts delivered through a human voice. Enoch served as the channel through which the decision of heaven reached the fallen. His message contained no ambiguity. The watchers would be bound. They would be cast into darkness. They would remain imprisoned until the day of final judgment. Their offspring, the Nephilim, would be destroyed. They would watch their children turn against each other and perish. The forbidden knowledge they taught would be purged from the earth. Everything they built would be torn down. Nothing they accomplished would endure. The severity of the judgment reflected the severity of the crime. The watchers had not simply sinned. They had corrupted the entire created order. They had violated the boundary between heaven and earth. They had produced beings that threatened to destroy humanity entirely. They had taught knowledge that led to universal wickedness. Their punishment matched their transgression. The delivery of this message by Enoch required courage. He stood alone before 200 powerful angels. These were beings who could destroy him physically with ease. They possessed knowledge and power far beyond human capacity. Yet he spoke without hesitation, without softening the verdict, without offering false hope. His righteousness gave him boldness. His divine commission gave him authority. The response of the watchers revealed their spiritual state. Instead of repenting, they asked Enoch to write a petition for them. They wanted him to carry a request for mercy back to heaven. They could not approach the divine throne themselves. They needed an intermediary. They needed someone who still had access to the presence they had forfeited. This request showed they understood their position. They knew they could not simply return to heaven. They knew they had severed their connection to the divine court. They recognized that judgment had been pronounced. Yet they hoped for mercy. They wanted Enoch to argue their case, to present their repentance, to ask for forgiveness. Enoch agreed to write the petition. This detail matters. He did not refuse them even though he knew the answer. He showed them mercy even as he delivered their doom. He treated them with a dignity they had not shown to humanity. He served as their scribe even though they were condemned. The text describes Enoch sitting beside the waters of Dan, south of Hermon to the west. He wrote out the petition. He recorded their plea for mercy. He documented their request for forgiveness. Then he read the petition aloud until he fell asleep. The specific mention of his falling asleep introduces what follows: a vision that would answer the petition definitively. In the vision, clouds and mist surrounded Enoch. He moved through them, propelled by winds and stars. He traveled rapidly through the air, approaching the heavenly palace. The architecture of heaven unfolded before him. Walls of crystal, floors of snow and ice, tongues of fire between the stones. A house greater than any earthly structure with ceilings like the path of stars and lightning. Inside the greater house stood another house more glorious still. Its floor was fire. Its foundation was fire. Its upper portion was lightning and the path of stars. Its roof blazed with flame. Cherubim surrounded it. The glory emanated such heat that Enoch could not look directly at it. A great throne sat within, its appearance like crystal, its wheels like the shining sun. From beneath the throne flowed streams of blazing fire. Enoch could not look at it directly. The great glory sat upon the throne. Even divine beings could not look upon this presence. No angel could enter. No created being could approach. A circle of fire surrounded the throne, preventing access. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before it, yet none approached closely. The voice from the throne spoke to Enoch. It addressed him directly, calling him forward. Though angels could not approach, Enoch was summoned. Though fire surrounded the throne, Enoch was called through it. The vision demonstrated his unique role. He had access that even unfallen angels lacked. His righteousness gave him permission to stand in the very presence of the Most High. The divine voice addressed the petition Enoch had written. The answer came without hesitation and without mercy for the watchers. They would not be forgiven. They had known better. They had understood the cosmic order. They had violated it willingly. They had sworn an oath to commit their crime. They would face the consequences they had chosen. The text records the specific condemnation. The watchers would see their children, the Nephilim, destroyed. They would witness the ruin of everything they loved. They would remain bound in darkness, unable to intercede, unable to act, unable to do anything except suffer the knowledge of what they had caused. This punishment would last until the great day of judgment when their final fate would be sealed. Heaven sent Enoch back with this answer. He returned to Abel's jail, to the place of divine rejection where the watchers waited. He stood before them again and delivered the response to their petition. The text describes their reaction. They became terrified. Trembling seized them. They fell on their faces before Enoch. Their terror makes sense. They had hoped for mercy. They had believed repentance might change their fate. They had thought their petition might move the divine heart. Instead, they received absolute condemnation. The door they had hoped remained open was sealed shut. The grace they sought was denied. The forgiveness they requested was impossible. The role of Enoch in this confrontation reveals the theology underlying the entire narrative. Heaven required a human witness against the watchers. Their crime was against humanity. A human voice had to pronounce their doom. Angels could bind them and cast them down. But a man had to tell them why. Enoch became that voice. His willingness to write their petition, even knowing it would be rejected, shows his character. He gave them what dignity remained to them. He treated them as beings worthy of a hearing, even though their judgment was sealed. He demonstrated the righteousness that had earned him his commission. The confrontation at Abel's jail marks a turning point. The watchers had fallen. Judgment had been pronounced. The witness had testified. Now the sentence would be executed. Raphael would bind Azazel. Michael would chain Shemihazah and his companions. Gabriel would turn the Nephilim against each other. The corruption would be cleansed. But before the judgment fell completely, Enoch would be shown more. His journey had only begun. The confrontation with the watchers was his first mission. Heaven had more to reveal. The cosmos held secrets that needed recording. Enoch the witness would become Enoch the explorer, Enoch the student of divine mysteries, Enoch the keeper of heavenly knowledge. The watchers remained in their place of rejection, awaiting their binding. Enoch departed, having fulfilled his first commission. He had stood before the fallen, he had delivered their doom. He had demonstrated that righteousness gave a human authority even over angels who had rebelled. His first journey established his role. His subsequent journeys would expand his knowledge until he became the master of all mysteries between heaven and earth. The Cosmic Tour, Secrets of the Universe. After confronting the Watchers, the education of Enoch deepened. The archangels became his guides through creation. They showed him the hidden architecture of reality. They revealed the storehouses where natural forces dwelt. They explained the structure that held the universe together. What began as a mission to condemn the fallen expanded into a comprehensive tour of everything that exists. Uriel led Enoch first to the western regions. There he saw the great river that flowed beyond the inhabited world. Mountains rose in that direction, covered with precious stones. Pearls, antimony, and jasper dotted the peaks. The stones glowed with inner light. These were not mere minerals. They possessed qualities that earthly gems could only dimly reflect. The angel explained the significance of each mountain. One peak held the throne of God when the Lord descended to visit earth with blessing. Another would serve as the site of judgment. A third contained the tree whose fruit would feed the righteous after the final restoration. Every feature of the landscape carried theological meaning. Geography and cosmology merged into a unified vision of divine purpose. Enoch traveled next to the center of the earth. There he witnessed the blessed tree, the tree that would not be touched until the great judgment. Its fragrance exceeded all spices. Its leaves and blossoms never withered. Its fruit would heal and give life. This tree, shown to Enoch in vision, represented the restoration that would follow judgment. Where the Watchers brought corruption, God would bring renewal. The tour proceeded to the ends of the earth. Enoch saw where heaven and earth met. Huge gates stood there, one for each wind. Through these gates, winds emerged to blow across the world. 12 openings faced different directions. Some brought blessing, others brought destruction. The winds obeyed precise orders. They emerged according to divine command, and returned when their work finished. Beyond the gates of the winds, Enoch observed the storehouses of other natural forces. Lightning dwelt in one chamber, thunder in another. Hail waited in its appointed place. Snow rested in frozen storehouses. Frost accumulated within chambers made of crystal. Water from rainfall collected in sealed compartments. Each phenomenon related to weather, each natural power that made contact with the earth, had its own specific dwelling until the moment it was called forth. This arrangement demonstrated divine structure. Nothing occurred through randomness or accident. The cosmos functioned by exact principles and frameworks. What human beings perceived as unpredictable weather patterns actually came from angels opening and closing particular storage places. What appeared to be natural mechanisms truly involved deliberate choices by spiritual entities carrying out divine commands. Uriel brought Enoch to where the stars were imprisoned. Specific stars had violated the orders assigned to them. They had come out from their gates during incorrect moments, or followed pathways they shouldn't have traveled. Because of this disobedience, they found themselves bound in a location of punishment. Their confinement would last for 10,000 ages, enduring consequences for their failure to keep to the courses designated for them. This confinement of rebellious stars mirrored the confinement of the Watchers. In the same way that angels had the capacity to rebel, celestial bodies could also transgress. The universe functioned under regulation. From the most exalted angel down to the tiniest star, everything owed submission to the one who created all things. Violation at any level resulted in judgment. Structure permeated everything. Rebellion faced punishment no matter where it appeared. The journey proceeded to where the luminaries dwelt. Enoch observed the travel patterns of both sun and moon. He witnessed their gates, their routes, their exact trajectories. The astronomical section of Enoch, spanning chapters 72 through 82, documents these observations with technical precision. The writings describe a solar calendar containing 364 days, separated into 4 seasons, each lasting 13 weeks. This calendar stood in opposition to the lunar calendar that certain communities had adopted. The significance of this astronomical understanding becomes apparent when placed in context. The Watchers had provided corrupted teachings about astronomy. They had shown people how to interpret destiny through the stars, how to engage in astrology, how to accept the belief that heavenly bodies determined human fate. Enoch gained access to the genuine astronomy. The stars moved by established regulations. They indicated times and periods. They gave off light. They didn't dictate fate. They didn't govern human decisions. They functioned as servants of the Creator, not as deities deserving worship or powers requiring fear. Enoch witnessed the portals from which the sun appeared. 12 gates existed, with 6 positioned in the east and 6 in the west. The sun passed through different gates during different periods of the year, which brought about the changing seasons. The writings give exact measurements. This particular gate generates this specific amount of daylight. That particular gate produces this duration of darkness. Everything functioned with mathematical exactness. The journey of the moon received attention just as detailed. Enoch discovered how the moon increased and decreased. He observed how its illumination came from the sun. He grasped the patterns that controlled its visibility. This understanding challenged superstitious beliefs about the moon. It possessed no independent force. It reflected light from the sun. Its phases obeyed predictable rhythms. It served as an instrument for marking time, not as a divine being. Past astronomical details, Enoch observed the dwelling locations of those who had died. The spirits of humans who had departed didn't wander without direction. They occupied specific chambers, divided based on their earthly lives. The righteous lived in agreeable locations with access to a water spring. The wicked endured suffering in regions of darkness. Those whose deaths had not been avenged continued crying out for justice. Each category of the dead filled its designated space. This revelation about the afterlife brought theological understanding. Death didn't terminate consciousness. Human spirits persisted in existence. They waited for ultimate judgment in places corresponding to their choices made on earth. The righteous experienced rest in tranquility. The wicked suffered torment. Those destroyed without justice maintained their appeal for vindication. The moral framework of the universe continued past death. Enoch saw the tree of wisdom that Adam and Eve had consumed from. It stood toward the east, extending upward toward heaven. Its fruit had granted knowledge of good and evil. The angel clarified that death entered the world by means of this tree. The decision to eat from it introduced mortality to humanity. However, the tree itself wasn't evil. The command not to eat represented a test. Breaking that test produced consequences. The geography Enoch investigated reached to creation's boundaries. He observed the massive abyss where waters moved in darkness. He saw the foundations supporting the earth, the pillars upon which the world stood. He noticed the corners of the earth, where various regions came together. He learned about the 4 quarters and their connection to the calendar and seasonal cycles. 7 mountains came into view during his vision, arranged from east to west. The central mountain rose tallest, resembling a throne. Its peak made contact with heaven. Precious stones covered every part of it. The entire mountain gleamed like God's throne. This summit would become the seat of the Holy One. When final judgment arrived, the geography of earth contained indicators for events at the end of time. Rivers of fire streamed through certain areas. They burned without end, never using up their fuel, never growing weaker. Enoch observed these rivers and recognized they symbolized the punishment waiting for the wicked. The fire wasn't symbolic. It existed as an actual feature of the cosmos, prepared to receive those who turned away from righteousness. Paradise came into view in the northeast. 7 mountains made of precious stones encircled it. Trees of fragrant wood flourished there in complete arrangement. Among them stood the tree of life, whose fragrance exceeded all others. This garden, separate from Eden yet comparable in nature, waited for the righteous. Following judgment, the holy would receive this place as their inheritance. They would consume from the tree of life and exist forever. During the entire journey, angels provided explanations for what Enoch observed. They identified each feature. They outlined its function. They linked physical geography to spiritual reality. The universe Enoch investigated wasn't neutral ground. Every mountain, every storage place, every gate gave witness to divine wisdom and power. Creation itself formed a vast temple structured by sacred principles. The cosmic journey transformed how Enoch understood things. Prior to these travels, he knew God through daily walking with the divine. Following these travels, he knew the structure of everything God had created. He grasped how creation operated. He observed the workings behind natural occurrences. He learned the geography of judgment and blessing. He became the human who knew the universe as angels understood it. This knowledge had a purpose. Enoch would document what he learned. He would compose writings containing these revelations. Later, people would read his records and comprehend that the universe functioned by divine regulation. They would understand that judgment stood ready. They would recognize that righteousness resulted in rest within pleasant locations, while wickedness resulted in torment. They would acquire the true astronomy that opposed the corrupted instruction of the Watchers. The tour ended with Enoch returning from his travels, possessing complete knowledge of creation's mysteries. He had observed what existed beyond human vision. He had journeyed where humans couldn't travel. He had acquired what angels knew. This wisdom elevated him beyond a prophet. It made him heaven's scribe, the guardian of mysteries, the human who connected earthly limitation with divine knowledge, the Messiah, and the Son of Man. The Book of Parables, chapters 37 through 71 of 1st Enoch, presents Enoch's most significant visions. These chapters, probably written in the 1st century before the Common Era, although some question the dating, portray the final judgment in striking detail. At the heart of these visions stands a mysterious figure identified as the Son of Man, the Chosen One, the Anointed One. Enoch observed this figure in heaven prior to the judgment's beginning. The Son of Man possessed a face filled with grace, resembling one of the holy angels. He stood before the Ancient of Days, the one whose clothing was white as snow, and whose hair resembled pure wool. This scene reflects the vision found in Daniel chapter 7, where one like a Son of Man arrives with heaven's clouds and approaches the Ancient of Days. The writings describe the Son of Man as selected prior to the world's creation. This existence before time sets him apart from regular humans or prophets. He existed in heaven before time started. God chose him for his purpose before the earth's foundation was established. His wisdom originated from the source of divine wisdom. His righteousness came directly from the Ancient of Days. This figure would occupy a throne of glory. The writings stress this repeatedly. A throne awaited the Son of Man. He would carry out judgment from this throne. Kings and rulers would be cast down from their thrones while this righteous one rose to his. The reversal of earthly power arrangements was total. Those who had oppressed the righteous would confront the one they had rejected. The Son of Man's authority reached across all judgment. He would judge both angels and humans. He would divide the righteous from the wicked. His declaration would establish final destiny. The writings state that wisdom flowed out before him like water. Righteousness streamed from his presence. He possessed total knowledge of all hidden matters. Nothing could escape his penetrating observation. Enoch witnessed the judgment scene through vision. The righteous and holy stood in the presence of the Son of Man. They had been concealed from the wicked throughout their earthly existence, but now they materialized in glory. The writings emphasize that the righteous suffered while on earth, but would experience joy in heaven. Their vindication was guaranteed. Their compensation was arranged. The kings and powerful individuals who had oppressed the righteous encountered terror. When they observed the Son of Man occupying his throne of glory, they recognized him. Some interpreters propose they recognized him as one they had dismissed during earthly existence. Others contend they simply acknowledged his authority in that instant. Regardless, their response was identical. Fear and distress gripped them. These earthly rulers pleaded for mercy. They requested time to worship the Lord of Spirits. They desired opportunity to confess and turn from their wrongdoing. However, the time for repentance had expired. The judgment was happening now. Their lives on earth had represented their opportunity. They had used that time oppressing the righteous, chasing their own glory, disregarding the divine will. Now they harvested what they had planted. The writings described the kings being removed from the Son of Man's presence. They would not destroy them right away. Rather, they would deliver them to angels of punishment. These angels would carry out the sentence. The wicked would encounter torment. They would suffer in relation to their offenses. They would experience the results of their rejection of righteousness. The Son of Man's relationship to the righteous contrasts dramatically with his role toward the wicked. For the holy ones, he represented a light, a hope, a joy. The writings state he would eat with them. He would live among them. They would wear garments of glory that never deteriorated. They would exist in his presence eternally. Their lives would continue without end. This fellowship between the Son of Man and the righteous signifies the ultimate restoration. What was lost in Eden would be recovered. Humanity would once more walk with God. The separation created by sin would finish. Death would be conquered. Sorrow would stop. The righteous would receive the earth renewed and exist forever in peace. The identification of this Son of Man figure has created extensive discussion. The writings themselves make a striking claim in chapter 71. There Enoch receives the message that he himself is the Son of Man. The angel addresses him, saying, "You are the Son of Man who was born for righteousness." This declaration has confused interpreters for centuries. Some scholars propose this represents Enoch's transformation into an angelic being. He becomes the Son of Man through his righteousness and his ascension. Others suggest the writings underwent editing, and this identification was inserted later. Still others insist that Enoch functions as a type or pattern of the Son of Man rather than being identical to him. The influence of these passages on subsequent Jewish and Christian thought appears substantial, although the precise relationship remains discussed among scholars. The Gospels present Jesus using the title Son of Man for himself many times. He refers to the Son of Man arriving on the clouds, occupying a throne, judging the nations. These images echo the Book of Parables very closely. Whether the New Testament authors knew 1 Enoch directly, and whether the parable section comes before or after the Gospels, remains a matter of scholarly discussion without firm agreement. The existence before creation of the Son of Man especially resonated with early Christian theology. The concept that the Messiah existed prior to creation, that he was selected and prepared from eternity, that he would occupy a divine throne and exercise universal judgment, these ideas appear in developed form in the Book of Parables. If this section predates Christianity, it indicates Jewish apocalyptic thought was already forming an elevated understanding of the coming deliverer. If it comes after Christianity, it may represent a response to or parallel development with Christian claims. The dating uncertainty means both possibilities remain open to scholarly consideration. The Book of Parables presents 3 parables or extended visions. Each develops different aspects of the final judgment and the Son of Man's purpose. The first parable describes the dwelling places of the righteous and the punishment of the wicked. The second parable concentrates on the judgment of the watchers and the vindication of the chosen one. The third parable depicts the exaltation of the Son of Man and the transformation of the earth. Throughout these visions, Enoch functions as both witness and participant. He observes the judgment. He documents what will occur, but he also undergoes transformation. The boundary between Enoch the observer and Enoch the observed becomes unclear. He watches the Son of Man's triumph while also being informed he is that Son of Man. This dual identity suggests the writings understand Enoch as representative of all the righteous who will be elevated. The Lord of Spirits, a title employed throughout the Book of Parables for God, selected the Son of Man prior to the world's beginning. This selection wasn't random. It reflected divine intention and design. The Son of Man embodied what God planned for humanity from creation. He represented the perfection that Adam forfeited. He would restore what the watchers corrupted. The wisdom residing in the Son of Man came from drinking at the fountain of divine wisdom. He possessed all understanding. He knew all secrets. He comprehended all mysteries. This complete knowledge made him suitable to judge. No one could mislead him. No hidden crime could avoid his notice. No false explanation could deceive him. His judgment would be absolutely just, because his knowledge was absolutely complete. Enoch's visions of the Son of Man therefore provide a theological framework for comprehending the final judgment. God would not destroy the wicked arbitrarily. The Son of Man would carry out perfect justice. The righteous would receive vindication. The oppressors would confront the one they oppressed. The cosmic structure, violated by the watchers, would be restored. A new age would begin, in which righteousness lived on earth permanently. These visions transformed how communities understood their suffering. If the Son of Man was real, if his throne waited for him, if judgment was guaranteed, then present oppression was temporary. The wicked might succeed for a time, but their time was limited. The righteous might suffer now, but their reward was eternal. This hope sustained communities facing persecution and violence. It gave significance to their faithfulness. It promised that their loyalty to righteousness would be recognized when the Son of Man appeared on his throne of glory. The Celestial Scribe, the Astronomical Book. The Astronomical Book, chapters 72 through 82 of 1st Enoch, represents the oldest portion of the Enochian corpus. Based on scholarly analysis, fragments discovered at Qumran date to the 3rd century before the Common Era. This writing reveals Enoch's knowledge of the heavenly bodies and their trajectories. More than simple astronomy, it presents a theology of time and a counter to the corrupted calendar teachings of the Watchers. Uriel, whose name means God is my light, functioned as Enoch's guide through these revelations. The angel demonstrated to him the regulations of the heavens, the routes of the luminaries, the gates through which they journeyed. Nothing about the movement of sun, moon, and stars occurred randomly. Everything obeyed exact divine command. The writings begin with the sun. 12 gates exist in the firmament of heaven from which the sun comes forth. 6 gates face east. 6 gates face west. The sun rises through one of the eastern gates and sets through the matching western gate. Different gates generate different lengths of day and night. The sun's passage through these gates produces the changing seasons. During the spring equinox, the sun rises through the fourth gate in the east. Day and night separate equally. This indicates the beginning of the year based on the calendar Enoch received. From this point, the sun advances progressively through other gates, producing longer days as summer draws near. At the summer solstice, the sun employs the sixth gate, generating the longest day of the year. Following the summer solstice, the progression reverses. The sun returns through the gates toward the fourth gate, which it reaches at the autumn equinox. Day and night again separate equally. Then the sun proceeds toward the first gate, arriving at it during the winter solstice. This produces the shortest day and longest night. From there, the cycle starts again, moving back toward the fourth gate and the spring equinox. The astronomical book supplies specific measurements. When the sun rises through the fourth gate, the day lasts exactly 12 parts, while the night lasts 12 parts. When the sun uses the sixth gate, the day extends to 16 parts, while the night reduces to 8 parts. When the sun travels through the first gate, the day measures only 8 parts, while the night stretches to 16 parts. These proportions control the rhythm of the year. The moon's movements get equally detailed treatment. The moon doesn't generate its own light. It reflects the illumination of the sun. Enoch observed this clearly. The moon waxes as it moves toward the sun, and wanes as it moves away. This understanding opposed ancient beliefs that gave independent power to the moon. The lunar cycle separates into 4 weeks of 7 days each. The moon starts as a thin crescent. It expands night by night until it achieves full illumination. Then it decreases night by night until it vanishes. The writings describe exactly how much of the moon's face displays light each night. On the first night, 1/14 of the moon lights up. By the 7th night, 1/2 glows. By the 14th night, the entire face shines. Then the diminishing starts. The astronomical book emphasizes that the moon's cycle doesn't align perfectly with the solar year. 12 lunar months generate only 354 days. The solar year, based on the writings, contains 364 days. This 10-day difference creates problems for calendars based on lunar cycles. Over time, the seasons shift. Festivals celebrated at the wrong times. The calendar loses its connection to agricultural realities. Enoch received the true calendar based purely on the sun. 364 days. Divide perfectly into 52 weeks of 7 days each. The year splits into 4 seasons of exactly 13 weeks. Each season starts on the same day of the week. The calendar possesses complete symmetry and structure. Festivals occur on the same dates every year. No confusion appears. No drift happens. This solar calendar directly challenged the lunar calendar that developed in Judaism following the Babylonian exile. The Book of Jubilees, which draws extensively on Enochic tradition, explicitly condemns those who follow the moon rather than the sun. It declares that following a lunar calendar results in celebrating festivals at incorrect times, violating the sacred rhythm God established in creation. The controversy extended past technical matters. Based on the astronomical book, the Watchers taught corrupted astronomy. They revealed how to interpret omens in the stars. They demonstrated to humans how to engage in astrology. They promoted the belief that heavenly bodies controlled human fate. This teaching undermined human responsibility and divine sovereignty at the same time. The true astronomy Enoch learned contradicted Watcher teachings on every point. The stars were not gods. They didn't control destiny. They obeyed fixed regulations set by the Creator. They appeared through assigned gates at appointed times. They functioned as indicators for seasons, days, and years. They supplied light. They displayed God's glory. But they determined nothing about human choices or fates. The writings list the names of 12 winds that blow through gates in the firmament. 4 winds hold primary positions at the cardinal directions. 8 winds fill intermediate positions. Each wind has its assigned gate and its specific character. Some bring blessing, others bring drought, still others bring storms. The winds obey divine command. They appear when summoned and stop when ordered. Even the stars that illuminate the night sky follow exact regulations. The writings name the leaders of the stars, the heads of thousands who govern the others. 4 leaders stand at the head of stellar orders. These keep the divisions and seasons based on divine command. They ensure all stars fulfill their appointed functions. The astronomical book documents Enoch's observation of stellar movements across the night sky. He noted which constellations rose at which times. He observed how stars moved in groups. He learned the names of the major stars and their positions relative to each other. This knowledge allowed proper timekeeping even at night. The emphasis throughout remains theological. These are not merely scientific observations. They testify to divine structure. They demonstrate that creation functions by regulation. They prove that the Creator established everything with wisdom and exactness. The complexity of celestial mechanics points to the intelligence behind it. The writings return repeatedly to the calendar question. The year contains 364 days. This number divides evenly by 7, by 4, by 13. It generates a perfectly symmetrical structure. Any deviation from this system violates the structure God established. Following the moon results in chaos and error. Following the sun maintains alignment with divine will. Uriel clarified to Enoch that future generations would deviate from the true calendar. They would add or subtract days. They would follow the moon rather than the sun. They would celebrate festivals at wrong times. This corruption of the calendar paralleled the corruption of other knowledge by the Watchers. In the same way they taught false astronomy, later generations would adopt false timekeeping. The angel warned that calendar corruption would result in religious corruption. When people celebrated Passover at the wrong time, they violated the memorial of the Exodus. When they observed Day of Atonement incorrectly, their worship missed its appointed moment. The calendar wasn't a minor technical issue. It established when the community met God in sacred time. Enoch received this astronomical knowledge to preserve it. He wrote it down in his writings. He passed it to his children, especially to Methuselah. The knowledge would persist through the flood. Noah would transport it on the ark. The righteous remnant would maintain the true calendar even when others fell away. The astronomical book concludes with exhortations to follow the calendar Enoch received. It promises blessing for those who maintain the correct times and seasons. It warns judgment against those who corrupt the sacred calendar. The stakes extend past technical accuracy. They involve maintaining connection to divine structure versus falling into chaos. This section of Enochic literature influenced the Qumran community profoundly. The Dead Sea Scrolls contain numerous calendrical writings. The community followed a 364-day solar calendar. They rejected the lunar calendar used by the Jerusalem temple authorities. This disagreement contributed to their separation from mainstream Judaism. They saw themselves as preserving the true times and seasons revealed to Enoch. The theological significance reaches past calendars. The astronomical book declares that creation functions by fixed divine regulations. The universe is not capricious. Time is not arbitrary. The heavens display structure and purpose. This structure reflects the character of the Creator. To align with this structure is to align with God. To corrupt this structure is to rebel against divine wisdom. Enoch the scribe became Enoch the astronomer. He learned the secrets of the heavens. He grasped how time operated. He received the true calendar. This knowledge made him more than a moral witness against the Watchers. It made him the keeper of cosmic wisdom, the human who understood how creation worked, the prophet who could guide communities in maintaining alignment with divine time, the dream visions from Eden to Apocalypse. Enoch's prophetic gift extended past witnessing present corruption and future judgment. He observed the entire sweep of human history from beginning to end. The Book of Dream Visions, chapters 83 through 90, presents two dreams Enoch experienced prior to his translation. These dreams used animal symbolism to narrate events from creation to the final age. The first dream came to Enoch while still young before he married. He lay down to sleep and experienced a terrifying vision. He observed heaven collapsing. He watched the earth being swallowed into the great abyss. The vision so disturbed him that he woke and went immediately to his grandfather, Mahalalel. He described what he had seen and asked for interpretation. Mahalalel grasped the dream's meaning. The collapsing heaven and sinking earth represented the coming flood. The vision revealed that judgment would fall on the earth. Everything would be destroyed, except a righteous remnant. This dream prepared Enoch for his later mission. He knew from youth that wickedness would bring catastrophe. He understood that God would not permit corruption to continue indefinitely. The second dream provides much more detail. Enoch observed the entire course of history unfold in symbolic form. Humans appeared as animals. Different types of animals represented different groups and nations. Bulls symbolized the patriarchs. Sheep represented the righteous. Wild animals stood for Gentile nations. The dream moved chronologically from creation through history to the final judgment. The vision started with creation. A white bull appeared representing Adam. From him came a heifer representing Eve. Then a black calf appeared, Cain, the first murderer. A red calf followed Abel, the innocent victim. The colors signified character. White represented righteousness. Black indicated wickedness. Red symbolized innocent bloodshed. The narrative moved quickly through early genealogies. Bulls multiplied. Some remained white, maintaining righteousness. Others turned black, falling into sin. The symbolic language allowed Enoch to cover long periods briefly, while emphasizing key moral distinctions. The Watchers appeared as stars falling from heaven. They descended and mingled with cows, representing their union with human women. From these unions came elephants, camels, and donkeys, the Nephilim. These hybrid creatures terrorized the bulls and cows. They devoured them. They caused violence to spread across the earth. The animal symbolism captured the unnatural character of the Watcher's offspring. Noah appeared as a white bull born in the midst of corruption. The dream showed him constructing a vessel while water started to rise. The flood arrived, drowning all the elephants, camels, and donkeys. It destroyed most of the bulls and cows as well. Only Noah and his family survived in the vessel. This preserved the white bulls through the judgment. Following the flood, the dream showed new black cows and bulls appearing. Corruption returned even after the cleansing waters receded. Human nature had not fundamentally changed. The capacity for wickedness remained. This explained why evil persisted even after God destroyed the wicked generation. The narrative then focused on Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, all represented as white bulls. From Jacob came 12 bulls, representing the 12 tribes. These bulls multiplied into sheep. The shift from bulls to sheep marked a transition. The patriarchs stood alone. Their descendants formed a community, a flock needing shepherding. The Egyptian bondage appeared as the sheep falling under the power of wild beasts, wolves representing the Egyptians. The sheep suffered and cried out. God heard their cry, and sent a sheep to deliver them. Moses, though the dream doesn't name him explicitly, this sheep led the flock out of bondage through water that drowned the pursuing wolves. The journey through the wilderness showed sheep following their deliverer to a good land, but they repeatedly turned aside to worship strange things. They forgot the one who saved them. This pattern of rebellion and rescue repeated throughout the dream. God raised up shepherds to guide the flock, but the flock often rejected these shepherds. The dream devoted significant attention to the period of the judges and kings. Shepherds led the sheep, but many shepherds failed in their duty. They allowed wolves to devour sheep. They enriched themselves instead of protecting the flock. They led the sheep astray rather than toward righteousness. This corruption among leaders paralleled the corruption among the people. The division of the kingdom appeared as the sheep splitting into 2 groups. The northern tribes and southern tribes separated. Both groups fell into idolatry. Both faced judgment. The Assyrian conquest of the northern kingdom showed as wild beasts devouring sheep. The Babylonian conquest of the southern kingdom appeared similarly. The flock scattered. The temple was destroyed. The sheep went into captivity. But even in captivity, some sheep remained white. These maintained righteousness despite surrounding wickedness. They refused to worship foreign gods. They kept the covenant even when far from their land. These faithful sheep represented the hope that preserved the community through exile. The return from Babylon appeared as sheep gathering again. They rebuilt what had been destroyed. They restored worship. But the dream showed that the sheep remained vulnerable. Wolves continued to threaten. The shepherds continued to fail. The period after the exile didn't bring the restoration the prophets had promised. The dream then moved to events contemporary with its composition. Birds began to attack the sheep. These birds represented the Seleucid Greeks under Antiochus Epiphanes. The persecution intensified. Sheep faced pressure to abandon their identity. Many gave in. They became like the birds that attacked them. But some sheep resisted. They fought back despite terrible cost. This resistance was the Maccabean revolt. The dream showed sheep growing horns and fighting the birds. Some sheep with great horns led the resistance. They achieved victories. They drove back the oppressors. This provided the terminus post quem for dating the dream visions. The writings clearly describe events from the 160s before the Common Era. But the dream didn't end with Maccabean triumph. It looked beyond to the final age. A white bull appeared representing the Messiah, or the restored Israel, or both. All the animals of the earth and birds of heaven gathered to bow before this white bull. The bull possessed great horns, showing power and authority. All the wild beasts and birds became peaceful. They no longer threatened the sheep. This transformation marked the beginning of the final age. God descended to earth. The old creation passed away. A new creation emerged. The writings describe a new house, larger and more glorious than any that had stood before. All the sheep entered this house. They became white bulls. Even those who had been black transformed into white. Righteousness became universal. The judgment of the Watchers appeared in this context. The stars that had fallen, those rebellious angels, were brought forth and cast into an abyss of fire. They received their final punishment. The shepherds who had failed in their duty also faced judgment. They too were thrown into the fire. Everyone who had corrupted or destroyed the flock faced consequences. Then the sword was given to the sheep. This detail has puzzled interpreters. Some suggest it represents the righteous executing judgment on the wicked. Others argue it symbolizes the sheep finally receiving power to defend themselves. Still others maintain it shows the transformation of the previously helpless flock into powerful warriors in the final age. Enoch watched this entire history unfold while sleeping. When he woke, he wept. The vision overwhelmed him. He observed the suffering his descendants would endure. He witnessed the repeated failures and restoration. He saw the persistence of evil across generations. Yet, he also observed the final triumph. He knew that despite all the struggles, righteousness would ultimately prevail. The dream format allowed the writings to present controversial material carefully. By using animals instead of naming nations directly, the author could critique rulers without explicit sedition. The symbolism protected the writer while clearly communicating to readers familiar with the code. Those who suffered under Greek oppression recognized themselves as the sheep with horns. They understood who the attacking birds represented. This vision gave hope to communities facing persecution. History was not random. God supervised every stage. Though evil seemed triumphant, judgment awaited the oppressors. Though the righteous suffered, vindication was coming. The pattern established from Eden forward showed that God always preserved a remnant. He always restored what seemed lost. He always brought judgment on those who violated his structure. The transformation of all animals into white bulls in the final age represented universal righteousness. Sin would be eliminated. Evil would be purged. Death would end. The curse from Eden would be lifted. Creation itself would be renewed. The long history of struggle and failure would culminate in eternal peace and holiness. Enoch's dream visions, therefore, provided a theological framework for understanding history. The past made sense as preparation for the present. The present sufferings had meaning as prelude to future glory. The righteous who died awaited resurrection. The wicked who triumphed would face reckoning. Everything moved toward the moment when God would establish his kingdom forever. These visions influenced how communities read their scriptures and understood their experiences. They saw themselves in the symbolic narrative. They identified with the faithful sheep resisting the birds. They hoped for the coming white bull who would transform everything. They believed their suffering had purpose in the divine plan. The dream visions demonstrated that Enoch was not merely a witness to the Watchers' fall. He was a prophet who observed all time. His knowledge encompassed past, present, and future. This comprehensive vision made his testimony more authoritative. He spoke not from limited human perspective, but from having witnessed the entire sweep of divine purpose through history. The legacy of a seer, Enoch and other traditions. Enoch's influence extended far past the writings explicitly attributed to him. His figure appears throughout Second Temple Jewish literature, early Christian writings, and even Islamic tradition. Each community that encountered his story adapted and expanded it based on their needs and theological frameworks. The Book of Jubilees, written in the 2nd century before the Common Era, gives Enoch significant attention. This writing retells Genesis and Exodus while adding extensive interpretive material. Based on Jubilees, Enoch was the first human to learn writing. He recorded all knowledge, all wisdom, all signs of heaven and earth. He wrote the regulations of the seasons and the divisions of years. Jubilees describes Enoch dwelling in the Garden of Eden following his translation. He didn't go to heaven permanently at first. Rather, God placed him in the garden to function as a witness. He would remain there until the day of judgment, when he would testify against those who corrupted themselves. This portrayal emphasizes Enoch's purpose as witness and scribe, rather than merely rewarded saint. The writing states that Enoch burned incense acceptable to God on Mount Quator. This mountain, whose location remains uncertain, became associated with Enoch's worship. The writings emphasize that Enoch offered incense in the proper manner at the proper times based on the proper calendar. His worship modeled what all worship should be, aligned with divine structure and cosmic time. Jubilees claims Enoch wrote 366 books total. This number equals the days in the solar year he revealed. The symbolism reinforced the connection between Enoch's teaching and proper timekeeping. Though only fragments of this vast library survived, the tradition insisted he recorded comprehensive knowledge of every subject. The Book of Giants, found in Aramaic fragments at Qumran, expands the story of the Nephilim. This writing focuses on the giants' reaction to prophetic dreams about the coming flood. Two giants, Oya and Heya, experienced disturbing visions. They observed a garden with trees. A voice came and uprooted most of the trees, leaving only 3. The giants couldn't interpret these dreams. They sent one of their number, Mahaway, to find Enoch and request interpretation. Mahaway traveled across the earth searching for the righteous seer. He eventually located Enoch and presented the dreams. Enoch's interpretation was devastating. The garden represented the earth. The trees represented the giants and their fathers, the Watchers. The uprooting symbolized their coming destruction in the flood. Only 3 would survive, Noah and his sons. This narrative shows Enoch functioning as a prophetic interpreter even for the offspring of the fallen angels. His wisdom exceeded all others. Even those doomed to destruction recognized his authority and sought his knowledge. The story emphasizes that judgment was not arbitrary. The condemned received warning. They knew their fate before it fell. The Book of Giants influenced later Manichaean literature significantly. The Manichaeans, a religious movement founded in the 3rd century of the Common Era, incorporated Enochic materials into their cosmology. They adapted the story of the Watchers and Giants to fit their dualistic theology. Fragments of their Book of Giants written in various languages show clear dependence on earlier Jewish traditions about Enoch. Second, Enoch, preserved in Old Church Slavonic, describes Enoch's heavenly journey in much greater detail than First Enoch provides. This writing, likely written in 1st century Egypt, shows Greek philosophical influence. It describes Enoch ascending through 7 heavens, meeting angels in each level, and finally standing before God's throne. In 2nd Enoch's account, Enoch receives extensive teaching during his 30 days in heaven. Angels show him the secrets of creation, the workings of natural phenomena, the structure of the cosmos. He learns about the courses of stars, the storehouses of snow and hail, the chambers of the winds. He observes the tree of life and the tree of knowledge. He witnesses paradise and the place of punishment. More significantly, 2nd Enoch describes Enoch's physical transformation. God commands the archangel Michael to remove Enoch's earthly clothing and anoint him with holy oil. Enoch becomes like one of the glorious ones. He appears as an angel. His face shines. His earthly nature transforms into something heavenly. This metamorphosis explains how Enoch could dwell permanently in heaven. He was no longer simply human. He had become an angelic being. Following 30 days of teaching, God sends Enoch back to earth temporarily. He must instruct his children. He must write down everything he learned. He must pass on his knowledge before returning to heaven forever. Enoch returns and teaches his sons for 30 days. He writes 366 books. Then angels take him back to heaven, and he doesn't return. 3rd Enoch A much later Hebrew writing from the 5th or 6th century of the Common Era takes the transformation theme further. This work identifies Enoch with Metatron, the greatest of all angels. The writings describe how Enoch ascended to heaven, and God transformed him completely. His flesh became flame, his bones became burning coals, his eyes became torches, his hair became fire. As Metatron, Enoch receives the title the Lesser YHWH. He sits on a throne at the entrance to the seventh heaven. All angels must pass by him. He possesses authority over all angelic orders. He knows all secrets. He documents all deeds. He functions as the celestial scribe, writing down the merits and sins of every person who ever lived. The third Enoch material shows how Jewish mysticism continued developing Enochic traditions even after Rabbinic Judaism marginalized the earlier apocalyptic writings. The rabbis who developed the Talmud generally avoided speculation about heavenly matters. They focused on law and practical religious life. But mystical circles preserved and elaborated the visions of Enoch, seeing in him the model of the visionary who ascends to behold divine secrets. Christian tradition embraced Enoch early. The letter of Jude explicitly quotes 1 Enoch chapter 1 verse 9, treating it as prophetic scripture. Jude states, "Enoch the seventh from Adam prophesied about them, saying," Then follows a passage describing God coming with 10,000s of his holy ones to execute judgment. This direct citation shows early Christian acceptance of Enochic material. The letter to the Hebrews includes Enoch in its faith chapter. Hebrews 11 verse 5 states that by faith Enoch was taken up so he should not see death. The writings add that before his taking up he was attested as having pleased God. This interpretation aligns with the Septuagint translation of Genesis chapter 5, which uses the Greek word for pleased instead of walked with. Several early church fathers valued Enochic literature. Tertullian writing in the late 2nd and early 3rd centuries defended first Enoch's authenticity. He argued that Noah preserved Enoch's writings on the ark. He treated the writing as genuinely ancient scripture. Clement of Alexandria also referenced Enochic material positively, but as the Christian biblical canon developed in the 4th century, most churches excluded Enochic writings. Questions about authorship and theology led to rejection. Only the Ethiopian Orthodox Church maintained 1 Enoch in its canon. This preservation proved crucial. Without Ethiopian manuscripts, the full writing might have been lost entirely. Islamic tradition knows Enoch as Idris. The Quran mentions him briefly in 2 surahs. Surah Maryam, verse 56 through 57 states, "And mention in the book Idris. Indeed, he was a man of truth and a prophet, and we raised him to a high station." Surah Al-Anbiya, verse 85, lists him among the patient and righteous. Later Islamic tradition expanded on these brief references. Hadith, literature, and commentary identified Idris with Enoch. They described him as the first to write with a pen, the first to study astronomy, the first to establish laws. He taught mathematics and writing to humans. God raised him to the 4th heaven, based on some traditions, or to paradise, based on others. Islamic scholars debated whether Idris lived before or after Noah. Some placed him before the flood, aligning with the biblical chronology. Others positioned him after Noah, perhaps confusing him with other prophets. But the identification with Enoch, the teacher of knowledge and writing, the one raised to a high station without dying, remained consistent. The commonalities across these traditions reveal Enoch's enduring significance. Jewish writings made him the witness against the Watchers and the keeper of astronomical knowledge. Christian writers saw in him a prophet who predicted final judgment and a faithful man rewarded with translation. Islamic traditions celebrated him as a teacher and prophet raised to honor. Each tradition adapted his story while maintaining core elements. His righteousness, his special knowledge, his transformation or ascension. This broad influence demonstrates that communities across centuries found in Enoch a powerful symbol. He represented the human who transcended normal limits through faithfulness. He embodied the possibility of access to divine wisdom. He testified that God rewards righteousness in extraordinary ways. His story encouraged believers facing persecution or corruption. It promised that walking with God leads to transformation and exaltation. The various Enochic writings, though not canonical in most traditions, continued to shape imagination and theology. They provided vocabulary for discussing angels, demons, final judgment, cosmic structure, and messianic expectation. They influenced art, literature, and popular religion. They offered a comprehensive worldview that explained evil's origin, suffering's meaning, and righteousness's ultimate triumph. The final ascent. Why was Enoch taken? The question that began this journey demands an answer. 5 verses in Genesis tell us Enoch walked with God and was taken. We've explored the writings that elaborate this brief account. We've observed his confrontation with the Watchers, his cosmic journeys, his astronomical knowledge, his prophetic dreams, his widespread influence. Now, we can address directly why God chose to take Enoch without death. The answer emerges from the totality of his story. Enoch was taken because he perfectly fulfilled multiple crucial purposes in the divine plan. He was the witness heaven required against the Watchers. He was the scribe who documented truths that needed preservation. He was the righteous man whose life demonstrated what walking with God truly meant. He was the prophet who observed from Eden to the final judgment. Each of these purposes contributed to his unique destiny. First, consider his purpose as witness. The Watchers had corrupted the earth. Their sin threatened to destroy humanity entirely. The cosmic structure they violated needed a human voice to testify against them. Angels could carry out judgment, but a human had to pronounce it. Enoch stood in that gap. He confronted the fallen angels. He delivered their doom. He wrote their petition and carried back its rejection. He documented their crimes and their punishment. This witness function required exceptional character. Enoch couldn't be compromised by the corruption around him. He had to maintain absolute righteousness while living among wickedness. He achieved this. The writings never attribute any sin to Enoch. He stands apart from the violence, the forbidden knowledge, the moral collapse. His integrity made him qualified to judge those who had no integrity. But witness required more than character. It required knowledge. Enoch had to understand what the Watchers had done wrong. He had to comprehend the cosmic structure they violated. This necessitated his education in heavenly secrets. The archangels took him through the universe. They showed him the storehouses, the gates, the chambers, the foundations. They revealed how creation operated. This knowledge let him testify with authority about what the Watchers had corrupted. Second, examine his purpose as scribe. Heaven needed the truth documented. The Watchers taught lies, corrupted astronomy, false magic, violent technologies. These lies spread like disease through human communities. The antidote required preserved truth. Enoch wrote the true calendar. He documented the proper movements of celestial bodies. He recorded the structure of the cosmos. He described the places of judgment and blessing. His writings became a library of divine wisdom. Though most of this library is lost, what survived shaped communities for centuries. The calendar he revealed guided the Qumran community. The judgment he described encouraged persecuted believers. The Son of Man, he witnessed, influenced messianic expectation. His writings serve purposes far past his lifetime. The scribe purpose explains why Enoch was taken rather than allowed to die. Dead men don't write. God needed Enoch alive and functioning to complete his documentation. His translation removed him from the corrupted earth, while keeping him able to fulfill his scribal mission. Based on some traditions, he continued writing in paradise or the Garden of Eden. His removal from normal mortality facilitated his ongoing work as heaven's recorder. Third, reflect on his purpose as model. Enoch demonstrated what it meant to walk with God. This wasn't casual association. This was 300 years of consistent faithfulness. Day after day, year after year, decade after decade, century after century, he maintained his relationship with the divine. He never wavered. He never compromised. He never turned aside to the wickedness surrounding him. His life became a standard. The letter to the Hebrews points to him as an example of faith. His reward translation, "without death," demonstrated divine approval. God honored such faithfulness publicly and permanently. Anyone who walked with God as Enoch did could hope for similar reward. His reward wasn't limited to translation alone, but it certainly included vindication and everlasting life. The precise moment of his translation holds deep significance. He was removed prior to the flood. This spared him from having to see the total annihilation of everything he knew. God protected him from that particular sorrow. Yet it also meant that his righteous presence was withdrawn before divine judgment arrived. The earth was left with Noah, another man of righteousness, who would carry humanity safely through the devastating waters. The removal of Enoch signaled the moment when judgment could no longer be avoided. Fourth, reflect deeply on his prophetic function. Enoch witnessed the full arc of history unfolding before him. Through his dream visions, everything from the beginning of creation to the ultimate restoration was revealed. He saw the recurring cycle of rebellion, judgment, preservation, and restoration playing out generation after generation. He grasped that the events of his era, involving the Watchers, foreshadowed patterns that would repeat themselves until the final age arrived. This all-encompassing vision elevated him beyond merely witnessing a single occurrence. He became a prophet whose message resonates across every epoch. His visions spoke directly to his contemporaries who would face the flood. They spoke to communities enduring persecution under the Seleucids. They spoke to early believers suffering under Roman oppression. They speak to any righteous community encircled by wickedness while awaiting divine intervention. Such a prophetic calling required preservation. Had Enoch experienced a normal death, he would rest among the righteous dead, waiting for resurrection. But his exceptional mission called for something entirely different. He needed to stay active, remain aware, continue functioning as both prophet and witness. Certain traditions position him in paradise, where he continues observing and documenting events. Other traditions place him in heaven itself, transformed into an angelic being. Regardless of the specific location, he remained consciously engaged in serving God rather than resting in the sleep of death. Fifth, think about the theological declaration his translation conveyed. Death made its entrance into the world as a result of sin. Genesis chapter 3 confirmed this consequence. The disobedience of Adam and Eve introduced mortality to all of humankind. Every single name listed in Genesis 5 concludes with the phrase, "and he died," the steady drumbeat echoing the curse. But Enoch shattered that pattern. He did not experience death. His righteousness granted him exemption from this universal judgment. This exemption announced a vital truth. The consequences brought by sin were not completely unavoidable. Through righteousness, even death itself could be conquered. The curse could be circumvented through absolute faithfulness. Enoch's translation stood as a testimony to hope. What sin introduced, godliness possessed the power to undo. The cycle of corruption and death didn't have to last forever. This theological statement became even more meaningful after the corruption spread by the Watchers. Violence consumed the earth. Death increased exponentially. The Nephilim brought destruction to innumerable people. Wickedness appeared to be everywhere. Against that dark backdrop, Enoch's translation blazed like a brilliant beacon. The faithfulness of one individual held significance. One righteous existence could rise above the surrounding decay. God both noticed and honored those who preserved their integrity despite being surrounded by corruption on every side. Sixth, consider the eschatological importance. Certain traditions propose that Enoch will make a return before the final judgment arrives. The book of Revelation describes two witnesses who will prophesy during the last days. Numerous interpreters have identified these witnesses as Enoch and Elijah, the only two men who never experienced death. According to this view, they would come back to earth, bear testimony against the ultimate wickedness, and be martyred before experiencing resurrection. Whether or not this particular interpretation proves accurate, Enoch's preserved condition makes him accessible for future assignments. He remains prepared to carry out whatever responsibility God assigns to him. His comprehensive knowledge of history, spanning from the very beginning to nearly the end, uniquely qualifies him for prophecy concerning the end times. He was present to witness the first great judgment that came through water. He could potentially witness the final judgment that will come through fire. His testimony would possess unparalleled authority. He has literally observed everything that culminated in the final crisis. The question of why Enoch was taken thus receives an answer with multiple layers. He was taken because his role as a witness against the Watchers was essential. He was taken because his work as heaven's scribe demanded continued existence. He was taken because his example needed to remain as a permanent